Let's call this thing to order, right? Is this, everybody ready?
Good luck.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Works Committee to order on Tuesday, November 28th at 12:30 p.m. Our first duty is a roll call and determination of quorum. When you're ready, Brenda.
Drew?
Here.
Solomon? Here. Modrick? Here. Roberts? Here. Nordstrom? Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now it's on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Roberts, second by...
Need to add.
Oh, okay, excuse me. Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Yep.
Me too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We need to add an item. Item 20 is to add Jim Anderson, an appointment to the Rapid City Area Air Quality Board.
Okay.
I'll amend my motions
Okay.
to add item 20.
Second.
And I'll second.
All right. Roberts moves and Modrick seconds to approve the agenda with the addition of item number 20. So now we go on to general public comment. It's a time for members of... Oh, excuse me. Yeah, you didn't vote. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Okay, we move on to general public comment. A time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the committee on any issue not limited to items on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting or any issue not on the agenda except by the placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the alderman present. And I'm seeing no public comment, so public comment is now closed. Now we go to consent items 1 through 17. Okay, I guess we have a few lights coming up for the council members. Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 17, please.
Thank you. Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Items 6 and 16, please.
All right, thank you. Not seeing any other lights. We'll approve the agenda with the exceptions of 6, 16, and 17. Do I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Moved by Jason Solomon, second by Richie Nordstrom. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And it carries. So we'll go on to item number 6. This is Sturgis Road Area Utility Reconstruction and Extension Project number 11-2001/CIP number 50824, estimated cost $2,100,000. And Jason Solomon, we go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could direct a question to Public Works Director Dale Tech, please. Hey, Dale, a pretty big price tag on this, and I know there's some work being done. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's prompting this and the work that's going to be done, and a timetable as well?
Most certainly. This project has been on our capital improvement list for a number of years. It's finally time to get it done. It's over in the Sturgis Road, West Chicago area. There's actually 3 roadways that we're going to be working in. Sturgis Road, we anticipate most of the work's going to be done behind the curb, so we won't actually be disturbing Sturgis Road with the exception of a couple of utility crossings. The other road is Trailsview Drive, I believe, and then the third road is West Rapid Street. Aged infrastructure primarily is the purpose for this. In addition to that, the DOT is reconstructing West Chicago. New utilities will be included in that project. This will all tie together with that. So this is an extension of what's going on with the West Chicago project, as well as replacing some infrastructure that's in pretty bad shape.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
I forgot to mention time frame.
Yeah.
We will be bidding this project probably just right after the first of the year. It's anticipated it will start construction in 2018 and should be completed by late 2018.
Okay, very good. Well, I'll second a motion if somebody wants to make one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay. Moved by Nordstrom and seconded by Jason Solomon. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And the motion carries. Okay. On to item 16. Authorize Mayor and Finance Officer to sign release of claims between City of Rapid City and Rapid Construction, LLC. And the chair recognizes Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to try, I guess, either maybe Joel or Dale Don't know which one wants to take this question, but we'll start with Joel, since it says City Attorney's Office. Joel, can you give us an explanation on the release that we're signing here and the story behind it?
Yes. As part of a project, there was a water line installed. I forget the name of the street. When we went out to final the project, we realized that the water line was not located properly within the easement, and it was too close to the edge of the easement. So the contractor that installed the water line went back and negotiated with the adjoining landowner, obtained an easement so that our water line is now located properly within an easement. The construction of the actual water line was completed by that time. And so there's a 2-year warranty period generally on these projects. We've gone way past the 2 years. However, because it wasn't properly located within the easement, we hadn't formally accepted the improvement. So technically, we could insist on another 2-year warranty period. I think the contractor's point is that they've already far exceeded the normal warranty period. There's no problems that have been identified by Public Works staff. So they asked that as part of this, we release them from their warranty essentially on this and any claims. So we agreed to do that in order to get this finalized.
Okay. All right, thank you. And just a quick question for Dale. Dale, you're satisfied with the release on this and the work that's been done?
Yes, we worked closely with the contractor in finding a solution to this issue. Obviously, one of the solutions would have been to dig it up and put it back in the proper location. The area that it's located won't ever be developed. It's on a hillside, so it made more sense to actually just obtain a correct easement to reflect the location of the existing water main.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield.
Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may make a motion to approve and retain the floor.
Second. Motion to approve by Nordstrom, second by Modrick, and a motion to, or a request to hold the floor. Go ahead, Richie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dale, just a little bit of background on Rapid Construction. They've been doing pretty good work for the city of Rapid City, so we have a good working relationship with them. In most times we have, yes, accidents or errors take place, but normally we have a good working relationship with this company.
Rapid Construction has bid on and been awarded numerous projects for the city of Rapid City and has successfully completed the work.
And mistakes just happen occasionally, or an oversight will take
Yeah,
place.
any underground construction is difficult, so yeah, it's not preferred for these things to happen, but they do
Agreed.
happen.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll yield.
All right, the motion on the floor is to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. On to item 17. Acknowledge the State Historic Preservation Office's action to delist the Pat Madison Cabin from the National Register of Historic Places and list it on the South Dakota State Register of Historic Places. Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm the liaison to this committee for the Historic Preservation Group, and if I can ask Sarah to come forward, Sarah Hansel to come forward and give us just a little short brief of background on this project, what's taking place, and why it is that we have to do it this process. And you did a very good job of explaining to the HPC group, and now you get an opportunity to explain it to the City Council. Thank you.
Sure. Sarah Hansel, Division of Long Range Planning. So the Pat Madison Cabin was originally located at 5th Street and Rapid Streets when Rapid City was founded. It was moved to Halley Park in 1926 and then more recently to the Journey Museum and Learning Center. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places and the State Register of Historic Places. However, following its being moved to the Journey, it lost its status under the National Register criteria. And so the State Preservation Office, which is the entity responsible for maintaining these lists, is removing it from the National Register, but they'd like to keep it on the State Register as a very important cultural landmark to the state and to Rapid City. So we agree with their decision to do that and support that it remain listed on the State Register.
Thank you, Matt. And one more question
Okay, sure.
or comment. So Sarah, thank you for that explanation of how, why we are losing the national registration, primarily because of the relocating of it. But the SHPO people, the State Preservation Group, is still interested in keeping it on their register. So things like this just have to happen once in a while. In relocating a national archive, historic property that it is brings a lot of memories back to a lot of people for the city of Rapid City and some residents that have been involved with this. So thank you for the background on that. I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Jason Solomon. Sarah, could you please stay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Sarah Hansel, so can you do us a favor and just talk about the significance of this cabin? Briefly, why it's significant to even.
Sure, I'm by no means an expert. The State Preservation Office did provide a copy of the National Register, the National Nomination Form, so the paperwork that they're submitting as part of this, and there's a detailed history of the cabin there. But what I can say is that it was built in the early period of Euro-American settlement in Rapid City by Rufus Pap Madison. It was later passed on to John Brennan, and then was donated to be relocated to Halley Park in 1926. So it's just kind of an early remnant of early architecture in Rapid City, and the people associated with founding.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I'll yield.
I have a question, Sarah. So when was this moved over to the Journey again?
2008, I believe.
2008. And at that time, no one had any indication that this would cause a removal from the national registers?
It was moved to Halley Park in 2012. And it's not just the relocation. There were several other alterations to the foundation and other structural elements of the site that were also changed at that time. So it's my understanding that some of those other alterations are part of the reason that the change in status has occurred.
I'm sorry to hear that. I think every time we lose one of these treasures, it's on us. You know, we really should be more aware of what's going on with historic preservation. Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move to acknowledge this.
Okay, move to acknowledge by Jason Solomon, second by Richie Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? And the motion passes. Okay, now we'll go on to the non-consent items, and I do have a speaker request from Kyle Traylor, and as long as we're going right into item 18, we might as well hear from him now, so.
Kyle Traylor with KTM Design Solutions. I'm here to represent the applicant for the exception to this next item. The applicant himself would like to request from the Public Works Committee that he be allowed to enter into an agreement that would provide that he'll basically pay for his portion of the sewer main, and we'd like to work with Public Works to write this agreement so that this infrastructure can be installed when it's needed. And I got just a quick little exhibit here. I'll show you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. I may need some help turning this on.
Continue? Does he want us to continue? I know.
Perfect, thank you.
Agreement, it sounds like.
All right, so this is roughly the area that we're talking about here. And this road right here is Murfield Drive. And the area of sewer main that we're asking to not install with this plating project runs from the intersection of Port Rush to approximately the end of this lot that we're requesting to plat. We're talking about approximately 350 feet of sewer main.
Excuse me a minute, Kyle. Are you on a microphone? Is that,
Here, let me.
we can't really hear you. Okay.
Is that better?
That's better.
There you go. All right, so I'll just run over this again real quick. The portion of sewer main that we're asking to not install at this time runs from the intersection of Port Rush to the southern edge of the lot that we're proposing to plat right now. It's about 350 feet of sewer main. The reason that we'd like to enter into this agreement to provide for these, to provide financial compensation for the future construction of this is simply that the sewer main isn't needed to serve the lot that we're looking at right now. To construct it requires an additional 420 feet of sewer main that needs to be built off-site, and then additional sewer main that needs to be built to the south of this piece. So what we'd be putting in right now with this project would essentially be 350 feet of dry sewer main with no in and no out. What we'd like to do is write this agreement so that when the sewer main is needed, the funds for this portion and the owner's half of this are provided for, so that this can all be done and designed and constructed as one project, so it can be constructed more efficiently in the right spot. And it takes out the guessing of, did we put this in at the right spot right now, and we have dry sewer main in the road.
Questions? Okay, we'll just go on. We're going. Okay. All right. Thank you, Kyle. Public comment is now closed. Item number 18, appeal of denied exception request from KTM Design Solutions on behalf of Dean Ham to waive the requirement to construct sewer main along Murfield Drive, City File 17EX197. The only exception denied by staff out of 4 total exceptions submitted for the project. Chair recognizes Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask Dale Keck a question?
Please do.
Thank you. Dale, on the statement that Kyle made about an agreement request with Public Works, is that something that you're reviewing now?
No, this is the first I've heard of this. I believe Kyle may have had a conversation with city staff some time ago, but that was not part of this sort of original exception request.
So does it seem right in order to perhaps continue this and allow that process to go through in the event that we can re-review this, since it is a dry main?
If so directed by council, staff's recommendation is still that sewer main needs to be constructed. They are platting property. They will be platting property that will need this water or sewer main in the future. Now's the best time to do it.
So since they're platting property, I think I saw on here where the actual platting is above it, not along this way. Is that correct?
They're platting adjacent to this area. So our subdivision ordinance are quite clear that says if you're platting property, all improvements must be made in the public rights of way that adjoin the property. And this is one of those infrastructure pieces that needs to be extended, not necessarily for the benefit of this property, but certainly for other properties further to the south, of which the property owner owns some of those as well.
So further to the south on this design here, it goes then to Sheridan Lake Road and then also crosses over to where there is storage units. Is that area the top where you're talking about? It's going to future drive that main where it will not be an end main at some point?
Well, Kyle's exhibit that he had up there showed that adjacent to this lot that they're platting, there's no direct connection to sewer. It's about 420 feet away. If they continue the sewer main to the south, it can go as far as Sheridan Lake Road, and then there's another gravity sewer main up the hill, if you will, that takes the flows from south and to the west. So there are a number of properties that would be served by this sewer main, and that's why city staff's recommending that it be installed at this time.
So with that, with a number of properties being used by the sewer main but not used by it now, can that also be called in at that time when that area that's unknown for development is developed?
Most certainly, yes. However, our best mechanism to get public infrastructure installed is at the time of platting of property.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dale, see if I'm on the right track of thinking here, and maybe Mr. Young can chime in as well. If we do these construction now, it'll be less, again, just to make sure I'm on the right thinking path here, that if we do the construction now, installing all of the infrastructure now, it'll be less disruptive once we start putting up the other things that are involved with the development such as other roadways, other driveways. It'll be less disruptive. We got a fresh canvas to start with, basically.
Right.
Am I correct thinking on that?
You are correct, Mr. Nordstrom. If I could expand on that just a little bit. This parcel that they're platting, all the improvements, road improvements have already been done by other people adjacent to this parcel. So there are no road improvements that this property has to do as far as platting is concerned. There are utility needs, though, that go beyond what was originally installed. So once again, this property doesn't have to make those road improvements, but for orderly development in the area, for future imminent development, this other infrastructure needs to be extended.
Exactly what I'm thinking is that if we have this fresh canvas now and doing all of our infrastructure and everything that's done underground. Mr. Young, do you have anything to add on to what Mr. Tech replied with Mike? Thank you. Thank you. I think that's the main reason, Kyle, that I'm concerned about waiving this appeal. And this, it appears that the city staff has given you several exceptions already. So this is one of those exceptions that on paper, for me, just doesn't make any sense in doing it in a backwards process. So if we develop later on, it just seems like it's very disruptive at that point when everything is starting to get developed and everything. So that's the reason why I'm going to be voting no on the appeal. Okay, thank you. I'll yield.
Chair recognizes John Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kyle, if you'd come up, I got a couple of questions, but I think we need to clarify that even though we would be waiving this exception, this wouldn't be an exception. It would be an agreement that they go into, that they would put it in eventually in the future. Can you tell me, because I've seen this, I don't know if you were working at KTM at the time, but I remember, it had me 3 or 4 years ago, when there were some tie-ins to some dry sewers out on Minnesota Street, and there was a huge issue because sometimes it's very difficult to get those alignments right.
That's correct, and I'm not familiar with the Minnesota Street situation exactly, but what we're talking about is, we're constructing one segment of sewer where we know we're going to have downstream sewer that's required, and we know we're going to have upstream sewer that's going to be required, and so there's efficiencies in designing all this at one time so that all of your elevations match up. If we construct this middle portion of this, then we're having to tie in from the downstream to the upstream and then make everything work without knowing what those actual development plans are, both down and upstream. It becomes a guessing game. And what the applicant is requesting is to not waive this and to not make that, just to say this isn't necessary. They're agreeing that it is. They just like to enter into that agreement, provide the dollars up front so that when this project does come forward, they're there. This all can be built as one project. To kind of speak to the last comment, we would be putting in the sewer right now. Basically, we'd be talking about 2 different construction projects. So we'd have the portion that we're talking about right now, which would be disruptive. Then we'd have, when the rest of this is actually needed, we'd have a downstream construction project that would have to come in after the fact too. So we're really talking about 2 different construction projects that would be required if we put the dry sewer in right now.
And that's where a lot of your costs come into, because you'd have 2 different designs and 2 different engineering costs, because they would be 2 different projects.
Correct.
So, when you're designing this, the larger the project, typically it goes down in value. It's like building anything. So I definitely support this. I think it's a good idea as long as the money is set aside, it's ready to go in the future. Why do 2 projects when you can do 1? So thank you.
Chair recognizes Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So maybe a couple of questions to Dale Tech to start with. First of all, Dale, have there been other developments where we've had this kind of agreement before?
We've talked about it, but we've never actually entered into into any type of agreement such as this.
Okay, and my other concern, and maybe Joel's the right one to answer this, let's say we have this agreement in place with this particular developer. Is that transferable? Should there be any sort of transition of ownership or anything like that if somebody else decides to build that property? Will there be reassurances? And I think I heard Kyle say money will be placed up front, which is big. That's a big bonus, but I want to know if it's transferable in case there's a shifting in ownership here.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably address that. The key would probably be to get the money up front, because that certainly is the concern. You don't know when it's going to develop, so somebody purchases the property and then the time comes to put it in, and we go say, oh, it's time to pay for the sewer, and they say, well, we didn't know anything about that. I don't know if a development agreement has been entered into for this property yet, or subdivision improvements. That might be something that's incorporated in that, and it allows, it basically puts the onus on the property owner to disclose that and transfer their obligations. If not, they're on the hook, although that's secured by a letter of credit, which we can't have an unlimited letter of credit for this. So, the key is going to be, if this is a direction you want to head, is making sure that we collect sufficient revenue that we're not caught short. Because if in 5 years, if we collect how much money it's going to cost us to build it now, and then it needs to be installed in 5 years, it's going to cost more. And if there's not sufficient funds available or ready, then we're going to have to make up the difference, or the taxpayers, I should say, will have to make up the difference. Okay. So, I think the key is going to be, if you had this direction, how much are we going to have to negotiate for a payment to cover the future cost of this? And I suspect there may be a difference of opinion on what the future cost is going to be, and it's a little tough because we don't know when it's actually going to be installed. So both sides kind of have to, frankly, make a reasonable guess of how long they think it's going to be and what the inflation is and what the cost is going to be. And somebody is probably going to come out behind in that. Either the taxpayers are going to be short and have to make up the difference, or we're going to have a little extra. So.
Okay. Kyle, can I ask you something based on what Joel just said? He brings up some good points. Wouldn't it be cheaper to install it now rather than sometime down the road, since you're already going to provide the money up front, and I think taking into account some reasonable increase in costs as years go on? As we know, inflation happens and it does cost more. So can you kind of talk about your willingness to provide money up front, and I hope that you're willing to provide it to the market at that time, versus doing it now when you know what the cost is going to be?
Sure, and really it all comes down to that efficiency in design that John's talking about. If we look at this as one singular project, which would be, essentially, we're talking about 2 manholes and a run of 8-inch sewer main, right, to which, the price is pretty constant. That's one thing, and that's fairly easy to do. The real reason is because this is a string, and there is downstream infrastructure that needs to be connected to this, and where the efficiency will need to come from is designing all this at one time to make sure that it works for whatever is required as this develops into the future. And if you don't mind, I'll kind of bring this up again. And so just to kind of help clarify this a little bit more, I think. So the red portion here, which doesn't show up as red very well, but from here to here, this is the portion that we're being asked to install right now. That's basically one run of sewer main with 2 manholes. Our downstream sewer manhole is located here. So we've got 420 feet of sewer main with additional infrastructure that's needed to make this useful at some point in time. Now, we've talked to the upstream owners, which in talking about kind of where this thing drains, we have this property, we've got this future property, here's Sheridan Lake Road, and then we've got this property right here. So we've got a few properties downstream. Now, the owners, we've had discussions with with the owners of this property, which is the other developable piece, and they've agreed that this is a good way to go about this too, just to set this dollars aside right now, so that when we know what needs to go here, when we know what is planned to go here, we can design this sewer main so that everything works, instead of kind of guessing at some of these assumptions right now.
Are we talking about today's dollars that you're setting aside? Or are we talking about some sort of percentage above that to cover any rising costs of installing this at a later date?
I think, well, for what we're talking about right now, it would really be at today's dollar. If we needed to make an adjustment up for a certain amount of time, we could definitely do that. But a reasonable amount of time, I guess, would be my request there.
Okay. So you just brought this to us today, so I'll probably make a decision today, but like always, I reserve my right to change my mind between now and city council as I chew on this a little bit more, but I do appreciate you taking time to answer my questions. And I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to continue this to allow an agreement request with Public Works to proceed in order to see if there is a resolution on this with the design and the advancement. I think it could be a good idea, so I'd like to make that motion and retain the floor. Can I get a second?
How long is the continuance?
I'd like that continuance to be worked out with Public Works, so I think a reasonable time frame would be the next Public Works Committee meeting,
Okay.
unless we need it sooner. I will have to defer probably on the time limit with, between the two parties.
Okay. Okay.
I can second that.
Okay, so right now we have a motion from Lisa Modrick to continue this item to the next Public Works meeting, and a second by Nordstrom. All in favor?
Can I retain the floor?
Oh, excuse me.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Thank you. So may I ask Dale a question?
Sure.
Dale, what kind of time frame do you think you would need in order to talk about this request? I would think there'd be some
I guess I need
legal
I
as
need a
well.
little clarification. Are we being directed to actually draft an agreement for the council to consider? Is that the direction that we're heading here?
It's an agreement request, so I think you'd probably need to work out some of the details, because we are talking about, as Councilman Solomon said, today's dollars, and so if that agreement could be reached where it puts it out in a time fashion, based on everybody's conversation, I'd like to see if an agreement can be made. If there's no agreement that can be made, then it would come back to us with that discussion.
Just to clarify, what I understand the intent of the committee is that you're receptive to the idea of not installing the line, the utility now, but to have, in lieu of just granting them an outright exception, to negotiate or attempt to negotiate an agreement whereby we collect some money now for the cost of that improvement, for their share of that cost of the improvement, and we hold on to that and then expend that towards the project when the time is needed to
And
install.
that creates good faith, as well as puts that time factor in there, which is going to have some inflation, and I would think it could be written as such as well. And one other question I have for you is, when these things happen, since we don't seem to have one in the past, and it just seems like some really good business that we could be working in on projects, isn't this filed on title or someplace where it will trigger up once something does come through a sale or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, we used to be pretty liberal with covenant agreements, and I get nervous continually putting covenants on property in the chain of title for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think it's appropriate to unnecessarily gum up people's chain of title with all these agreements. The second is that although a commercial or a larger business would be more careful, I would hope, but people don't always tend to pay attention to the 80 or 90 pages of documents that are set in front of them at closing or just prior to closing, and so a lot of that stuff gets missed. So while it may make the council feel better, I don't know that it always gives people the actual notice that you think it does. So again, I would prefer to have money in hand now for a couple of reasons. One, if you try to go back and get it from a subsequent purchaser, they're going to say, well, I didn't know anything about this, and this isn't fair. You should have made the original developer do this, and it's unfair to ask me to do it. If you have some agreement that they will just pay at the time, and then you go to them at that time and say, boy, well, I had the money at that time, I don't have the money anymore, and I would love to pay you, but now I can't. I mean, it's obvious why we'd want to get the money in hand now. So if we have the money in hand, I think we basically probably have to accept that if at the time it is somewhat short, that we are going to have to make that up, and that we are probably not going to be able to go back and look at anybody else to make up that difference.
So at this negotiation time, this is the time to put in that inflationary factor clause, so that if they're putting in $400,000 today and it costs $500,000 in 10 years from now, and that's the time that it triggers, that they make up the difference, not the city, and that should be able to be approached in the agreement.
And that is fine, but at the same time, if there is a $50,000 difference in 7 years, okay, who are we making the agreement with? Are they even still around? If it's an individual, are they still alive? Where is their assets? If it is a corporate entity, have they, been disbanded? So again, you can put in there that you can go back and collect that difference, but you have to be realistic that there are some impediments to that. And just because you have it in there doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it. Because even if the person is still around, again, if they don't have the funds in order to pay you, then you're not going to get paid.
So if we're retaining funds, wouldn't we transparently be required to acknowledge the fact that we've got funds in there and make sure that the money trail follows the funds that we've
Yes.
retained? So that would be what would make this agreement a strong agreement, and then put the rest of the factors in so that it can be done. So we're holding the money.
From the city's perspective, I would certainly prefer to collect more money than was needed and then refund some back to the corporate entity if when it's built it is not needed, than to try to go after whatever entity to collect the money down the road.
Madam Chair, can I ask one more question? I
You
know I'm
can,
taking up some
yes,
time.
yes.
So if we collect more money, what's the calculation on that more money? What do we figure on that?
That's what we'll need to negotiate, and that's what I took from your statement. Your inclination is to enter into an agreement to not require it to be installed now, but not grant the exception outright, to have an agreement, have money provided now. I think the only thing really to negotiate is how much that amount is and whether they can live with it, or the amount they can live with, we can live with. If we can, and an agreement comes back to you for approval. If we can't, then I guess we come back and report to you that we were not able to reach an amount, and I suspect we'll have a debate at that point about whether or not the staff amount or the developer amount is the appropriate amount.
Sounds like a good idea to me. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One other issue that I see in regards to this agreement is who then becomes a responsible party for the design, bid, and construction of this work. And I guess at face value, it looks like it's going to be the city of Rapid City. Therefore, the city will be doing what normally the developers have done on these types of projects. So that's another effort that the city will have to undertake, and there are costs involved in that. There are design costs, there are construction administration costs that normally the developer is responsible for. So it's not just the cost of the pipe, but there's costs in the administration and design of this type of infrastructure as well that'll have to be contemplated as part of an agreement.
All right, I haven't spoken yet on this particular item. I am going to vote against this appeal, or against going on with a continuance, because I just think it sets up a dangerous precedent for us to make an exception for this group, and then we'll be putting ourselves at risk in the future. So I cannot support continuing this item just because of the responsibilities that will be taken on by the city in this project. So, but the motion right now is to continue this until the next Public Works meeting, and for the city and staff and the engineering company to enter into an agreement. So all in favor, that's what I hear, okay? So all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No.
2 noes.
The motion passes with 3 in favor and 2 against. That leaves us on to item 19. And thank you to the members of this committee for the good discussion. Exception request to allow 52 dwelling units with 1 point of access from Prestwick Road for proposed Phase 1 of Red Rock Estates, and to allow 56 dwelling units with 1 point of access from Prestwick Road for proposed Phase 2 of Red Rock Estates, allowing the owner to plat 7 more single-family residential lots in proposed Phase 1 and 4 more single-family residential lots in proposed Phase 2. And this is City File 17EX200. John Roberts.
Thank you very much. I want to make a motion that we accept this exception request, and I want to hold the floor.
Okay, a motion by Roberts, second by Modrick, and Roberts holds floor.
Thank you very much. Kyle, if you don't mind stepping up. Reading through this, I noticed that one of the things that was asked for allowing only one access was sprinkler systems to go into all of the units, which I think is a good idea, and I'm sure that our assistant fire chief likes it too. I see him smiling over there. You know, because this is about the only way that we can sort of force these in, and I hate to say that word force because, you know, I know now the cost in the last few years has came down considerably, and it's getting more and more economical to do. And I do want to kind of put a plug out for it. I think that it's a good idea if you can afford to do it. I don't think it's a good idea to be forced into doing it, but I think it's a very good idea if a person can afford to do it. Not only are your insurance rates cheaper, but you know there are a lot of safety issues with this. You know, looking at some future developments that some people I'm involved with, this is one thing that we're mulling over because I think going into the future, I think it's going to be something very important to do, and especially when we're talking about, you know, downsizing some of these lots, maximizing density, doing a few things. I think it's something that's going to be very important for safety going into the future, and also it's a trend. I mean, we're going to see more and more and more of it going into the future. So anyway, I just wanted to say I totally support this. I made the motion, but I also support the fact that, you know, you guys are going to sprinkle all this out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Jason Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could direct a question to Tim Billings,
Please do.
So, Tim, in this neighborhood, and for all disclosure, I live in this neighborhood, and I'm always concerned about the ingress and egress out of the neighborhood. I am. However, you are satisfied with this compromise, which is good. But one thing I want to know is, what was the response time of the recent fire out in Red Rock Meadows from the fire department out there? And what was your biggest issues getting in and out through there in terms of response time?
Thank you very much for the question. A great question. I believe, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but it's a little over 7 minutes response time, which is actually, given the distance, the biggest hurdle really there is distance. Access to the neighborhood wasn't distinctly an issue. We do have issues with looky-loos plugging up the streets from time to time, and a lot of folks with today's modern technologies with cell phones and so forth spend more time observing the scene than reporting it or moving out of the way. But really the distance was the biggest issue there.
Okay. So what is the distance between the nearest fire station and that particular neighborhood?
It would be Fire Station 6, which is at on Promise Drive. There's also a volunteer station which provides aid to us as well, which is Whispering Pines, which is approximately, I'm going to say about 3/4 of a mile to the south of this location. Otherwise, our closest station is roughly 6 miles.
What's ideal? What's the ideal distance?
Anything within the 4 to 8 minute time response is typically ideal. 4 to 6, 4 to 8, somewhere in that range. An exact distance really is more dependent upon roadway configuration, terrain, given conditions. which is really, if I may add, one of the real benefits to having the residential fire sprinkler protection is that's the sole piece or the sole tool in our toolbox that offsets all of that. It's truly the firefighter on duty in your house awaiting the incident and controlling it at the time, very near the time of start.
And kudos again to the fire department for the quick action, because it was very quick. I mean, we were moments away from having the next house catch on fire because, as you have explained to us, today's building materials are a little more flammable on newer construction. The soffits, I believe, is what you have referenced, and so
absolutely.
The only reason to deny this would be public safety, and it's hard to deny that someone who's in charge of public safety has said that it's okay. So I'm okay with that, but I do know residents of the neighborhood, of which that's my neighborhood. The residents of that neighborhood are concerned about the in and out of that neighborhood because of public safety, and fire being the number one thing. And having a fire out there recently was a great reminder to us and kind of opened our eyes to say, this is a really big deal, because Chapel Valley has one in and out. Of course, they're a bridge, but that's not ideal. And here, I fear a little bit with all of the development going on back here that we're pushing it into a corner, because, I mean, we have several pieces of development as we have here today, and there's others coming through the Planning Commission. And well, awesome. I want to see those things develop, but I also want to have good response time. Sheridan Lake Road is obviously could be widened to help with the traffic flow, because if you clog up the traffic and responders are trying to get in, that could be an issue. So there are a lot of ongoing issues as it relates to the Red Rocks neighborhood and countryside and all of that. But on this particular item, we'll allow the exception. I will allow that exception for the dwelling units for 7 more single-family lots in this particular situation. But as we move forward in this discussion, as development happens out here, we really need to talk about the ingress, egress out of that neighborhood. And the county shares a good chunk of the Sheridan Lake Road that connects to the city. Unfortunately, this wasn't planned real well for a connection to the city. We have to use the county to get there. And so we really need to talk through these issues so that everybody's safe, that the flow is good in and out, and it continues to maintain that route. And I'll just add one more thing. I know I'm belaboring the point, but I'll agree with Alderman Roberts. If you can afford to do this, do it. It's a great deal, and it's a good compromise, and I appreciate everybody working together on this. City is being flexible. They're getting something that I think will be a lot of value to those homeowners, and they'll see hopefully a safety return by not having a fire. And so anyways, that's all I'll say for that. So just bottom line, it's all about public safety. It's all about being able to get in and out of there and having traffic not clog up, so that in case something does go wrong, folks aren't stuck. With that, I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. Well, Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I couldn't agree with Alderman Solomon any more than what was already said, but there's also other factors to be considered. Mr. Billings, are you on the LEPC committee as well?
I am not.
You have staff, though, that goes to that?
Correct, we do.
The reason I bring this up is, in addition to what Alderman Solomon has already presented to us, is that there's a lot of other factors to take into consideration. Primarily the need for a second in and out. The biggest thing that I really recall, and the biggest fear that I have, is any kind of a forest fire or a grass fire starts being engaged in this area. That presents all kinds of new problems for us. So if there is an opportunity to bring up not only this item, but we have other comparable items that could be brought to the LEPC for this to be considered. I don't know that I'm very new to that committee, so I don't know if it's been discussed in the past, but it's also another additional item that we need to take a look at from that vantage point. Thank you. I'll yield.
I would just like to chime in on this a little bit, and I will be voting for the exception. Oh, okay. Okay. Because of Chapel Valley and those issues there, but there is a creek there. There's a bridge there. It's very different. I mean, if you really had to get out, you could drive across somebody's yard. You know, there's other options, because if you can't get out of Chapel Valley, there's a creek. So I think this is a really different thing that we're looking at here, and maybe even in the future there are roads that could be constructed because of this is developing so quickly. So I'm going to go for the exception request, but just because Chapel Valley to me is a different item altogether. Fire liaison, I'm going to recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, I definitely appreciate the conversation regarding the single point of access, and it's not something that we take lightly by any means as it comes to that. And those other factors do come into play, whether or not there's distinct hazards because of topography, additional hazards from floodway, whether or not we can mitigate that with the use of fire sprinkler protection. There may be times, and there has been in other locations, where we've not been able to support it just because of other features that have come into play. So we really look at all of these as closely as possible to try to make the best decision we can, and definitely keep the public safety aspect in mind. The thing that the fire sprinkler protection does in this particular case is it does help us in the instance of if we do have an incident in that particular location. It minimizes our traffic into that area and plugging up the roadway for an extended period of time, and oftentimes can reduce it to a single resource responding to that. So, but we're definitely open to looking at any other options that might be available to us, or other concerns you may have that we should be considering that maybe I've overlooked. So, but thank you.
Joel, did you want to get in on this?
I just wanted to make sure that we're absolutely clear. You're approving the exception or the request with the stipulations, correct?
Okay. And that's it then. Okay. The motion, why don't we have a motion? We need something, well, I want it with stipulations from someone. With stipulations.
I did.
You did?
With stipulations.
Okay, all right, okay. We've got a motion from Roberts to approve this request with stipulations, as second by Lisa Modrick. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And it carries. Okay, now we go on to item number 20, and that is to confirm the new appointment of Jim Anderson to the Rapid City Area Air Quality Board. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make the motion to add Jim Anderson to the Air Quality Board.
Okay, motion by Nordstrom, second by Roberts, and all in favor? Aye. And Jim Anderson is now welcome to the Rapid City Area Air Quality Board. Excuse me, sorry. Okay, that's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're done.